Within the ancient walls of Vatican City lies a secret that few visitors ever discover. Beyond the magnificent frescoes of the Sistine Chapel and the grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican holds another treasure, one that has gazed, not down at the faithful, but up toward the heavens. Long before the Church possessed telescopes or understood the nature of distant stars, medieval scholars in Rome pondered the mysteries above. The story of Vatican astronomy begins not with rebellion against faith, but within it, in the minds of men who saw the study of the cosmos as a divine calling dot in the 13th century. As Europe emerged from the Dark Ages, the Vatican became an unlikely sanctuary for astronomical knowledge. Pope Gregory IX and his successors, despite their reputation as guardians of religious orthodoxy, recognized that understanding the heavens was essential for a practical purpose, creating an accurate calendar to properly observe holy days. The calculation of Easter, Christianity's most sacred feast, depended on precise knowledge of lunar cycles and celestial movements. These early Vatican astronomers were not scientists in the modern sense, but rather theologians and mathematicians who believed the perfection of God's creation would be reflected in the perfect mathematical harmony of the cosmos. They inherited ancient Greek and Arabic astronomical texts, preserved through the tumultuous centuries by monasteries and Islamic scholars. These precious manuscripts contained the geocentric model of Ptolemy, placing Earth at the center of creation, a view that conveniently aligned with Christian theology. But the seeds of a profound conflict were already being planted. As early as the 13th century, scholars like Robert Grosseteste and Roger Bacon at the University of Oxford began proposing experimental methods to study natural phenomena. While these men were devout Christians, their approach would eventually lead to questions that would shake the very foundations of religious cosmology. The Vatican's interest in astronomy intensified during the Renaissance. Pope Sixtus IV renovated the Vatican Library in 1475, expanding its collection of astronomical texts. Meanwhile, the wider intellectual revival across Europe led to renewed interest in observing the night sky directly, rather than merely studying ancient authorities. The stage was being set for a revolution in our understanding of the cosmos, one that would place the Vatican at a crossroads between tradition and discovery. In 1543, as the Renaissance bloomed across Europe, a revolutionary text quietly appeared that would forever change humanity's place in the universe. On his deathbed, Polish astronomer Nicolaus Copernicus published On the Revolutions of the Celestial Spheres, proposing that the Earth revolves around the Sun, not the other way around. The Copernican model directly challenged the geocentric worldview that had dominated for centuries, a view embedded not just in astronomy but in Christian theology itself. Surprisingly, the Vatican's initial reaction was not immediate condemnation. For decades, church authorities viewed Copernicus's work as a useful mathematical model rather than literal truth. Cardinals and even popes studied these ideas with scholarly interest. Pope Clement VII had received an earlier outline of Copernicus's theory with apparent approval. This period of tolerance reflected the Renaissance Vatican's genuine interest in astronomical knowledge, even when it potentially conflicted with traditional interpretations of Scripture. This momentary openness would soon be tested by a man whose brilliant mind and defiant spirit would force the Church to take a stand. Galileo Galilei, a mathematician from Florence, did something revolutionary in 1609. He pointed a new Dutch invention, the telescope, toward the night sky. What he saw changed everything. The moon was not a perfect sphere, but had mountains and craters. Venus showed phases like the moon, proving it orbited the sun. Jupiter had moons of its own, showing that not all celestial bodies orbited Earth. The Milky Way resolved into countless individual stars. These observations, published in 1610 in Sidereus Nuncius, or Starry Messenger, provided compelling evidence for the Copernican model. More importantly, they demonstrated that the heavens were not made of perfect, unchanging crystalline spheres, as Aristotelian cosmology had taught for centuries. The universe was far more complex and dynamic than anyone had imagined. Galileo's work sent shock waves through European intellectual circles, including the Vatican. Initially, his discoveries were met with fascination rather than hostility. Cardinal Maffeo Barberini, who would later become Pope Urban VIII, personally praised Galileo's achievements. Jesuit astronomers at the Roman College confirmed his observations. For a brief moment it seemed the Church might embrace this new vision of the cosmos, but as Galileo grew more outspoken in his defense of heliocentrism, tensions mounted. The theological implications were profound. If Earth was not the center of creation, what did that mean for humanity's special place in God's plan? If the Bible described the sun stopping in the sky for Joshua, but the sun didn't actually move around Earth, how should Scripture be interpreted? These questions struck at the heart of religious authority and biblical interpretation. In 1616, the Vatican's Holy Office declared the Copernican theory foolish and absurd in philosophy, and formally heretical. Galileo was instructed to abandon the idea that Earth moves around the sun, yet even then, astronomy at the Vatican continued. The Church needed astronomical knowledge, regardless of which cosmological model was officially endorsed. The reform of the Julian calendar under Pope Gregory XIII in 1582 had already demonstrated how crucial accurate celestial observations were for religious purposes. Despite growing tensions between emerging scientific methods and traditional theology, the seeds of the Vatican Observatory were being planted. The Church was developing a complex relationship with astronomy, officially resistant to theoretical innovations that challenged Scripture, yet practically invested in celestial observation. This paradox would define Vatican astronomy for centuries to come. The infamous trial of Galileo in 1633 marked a turning point. Forced to recant his support for heliocentrism under threat of torture, the aging astronomer allegedly muttered, "Eper si move," and yet it moves, a phrase that captures the inevitable advance of scientific truth despite institutional resistance. The Vatican had taken its stand against the new astronomy, but reality would prove more stubborn than dogma. Even as Galileo lived under house arrest, a new generation of astronomers across Europe built upon his work. In Protestant countries, less constrained by Vatican authority, scientists like Johannes Kepler refined the heliocentric model, showing that planets move in elliptical rather than circular orbits. The mechanical universe was coming into view. one governed by mathematical laws rather than divine intervention. The Vatican, however, did not abandon astronomy. Instead, it adapted. By the late 17th century, Pope Alexander VII had commissioned astronomical frescoes for the Vatican Library. The Gregorian Tower was built to house astronomical instruments. Slowly and cautiously, the Church began accommodating new astronomical discoveries while maintaining theological orthodoxy. This balancing act would become characteristic of Vatican astronomy, embracing the study of the heavens while searching for ways to reconcile it with faith. In the quiet corridors of Vatican City, far from the public squares where Galileo had once been condemned, priests continued to study the stars. These men, often members of the Jesuit order, renowned for their scientific scholarship, maintained careful observations of celestial bodies. They were laying the groundwork for what would eventually become one of the world's oldest astronomical institutions. In their meticulous records and calculations, we find the origins of the Vatican Observatory, born in an age of conflict between emerging science and traditional faith, yet surviving through the Church's remarkable ability to adapt and evolve. The story of the Vatican's astronomical tower begins not with a triumphant embrace of science, but with a deliberate political calculation. In 1572, a startling event occurred in the night sky. A new star suddenly appeared where none had been before. This stellar nova, what we now know was a supernova, contradicted the Aristotelian belief that the heavens were perfect and unchanging. Across Europe, astronomers frantically documented this celestial anomaly, including the brilliant Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe. The Vatican could not ignore such a prominent celestial event that challenged established cosmology. Pope Gregory XIII, already planning a much-needed reform of the calendar, recognized that the Church needed better astronomical facilities. The Julian calendar, in use since the time of Julius Caesar, had fallen out of alignment with the seasons by 10 days. Easter was drifting away from its proper place in the spring. To address this practical religious concern, the Pope assembled a team of mathematicians and astronomers, including the Jesuit mathematician Christopher Clavius. This commission's work led to the Gregorian calendar we still use today, introduced in 1582. But it also highlighted the need for ongoing astronomical observations. The reform required precise measurements of the solar year and lunar cycles, measurements that could only be made with dedicated instruments and observing facilities. Thus was born the Vatican's first permanent astronomical installation, the Tower of the Winds. Rising from the Vatican Palace, the Tour dei Venti was completed in 1580, a structure designed specifically for astronomical observation. The tower's very name reflects its dual purpose, to study both the heavens above and weather patterns below. Within its walls, a meridian line was drawn across the floor, a precisely positioned strip that would track the sun's movement through the seasons. A small hole in the southern wall allowed sunlight to project onto this line, creating a massive solar calendar within the tower itself. But why build such a facility in secret? The answer lies in the complex politics of Counter-Reformation. Rome. While the Vatican needed astronomy for practical purposes, it remained deeply suspicious of theories that contradicted Scripture. The Tower of the Winds represented a delicate compromise, the Church would continue astronomical research behind closed doors while publicly maintaining theological orthodoxy. The tower became a sanctuary for Vatican astronomers, a place where observation could proceed away from public scrutiny. Here, instruments were installed, celestial movements recorded, and calendrical calculations refined. Yet access was strictly controlled. Not just anyone could climb its stairs and peer through its windows at the heavens. Knowledge gathered here served the Church's interests first, maintaining its authority over time itself through control of the calendar dot. As the 17th century dawned, the tower's significance grew. The controversy surrounding Galileo highlighted the dangerous territory where astronomy and theology overlapped. Yet even as Galileo faced the Inquisition, work continued in the Tower of the Winds. The Vatican needed astronomical knowledge regardless of the theological disputes it might provoke. The tower became a symbol of this paradox, a place where scientific inquiry proceeded within strict theological boundaries. The Jesuits, that scholarly religious order founded by Ignatius Loyola, became the primary caretakers of Vatican astronomy. Their mathematical training and religious discipline made them ideal for navigating the perilous waters between scientific discovery and doctrinal orthodoxy. In the Tower of the Winds and other Vatican facilities, Jesuit astronomers made observations, calculated orbits, and contributed to the growing body of astronomical knowledge, all while carefully avoiding conclusions that might contradict Church teaching. One such figure was Father Athanasius Kircher, a German Jesuit, whose intellectual curiosity seemed boundless. Arriving in Rome in 1633, the very year of Galileo's trial, Kircher established himself as the Vatican's preeminent scientific mind. Though he rejected the Copernican model, Kircher embraced astronomical observation. He studied sunspots, comets, and planetary movements. His museum in the Roman College became a wonder of Europe, filled with astronomical instruments and natural curiosities from around the world. Kircher embodied the Vatican's approach to astronomy in this period, enthusiastic about observation and measurement, but cautious about theoretical conclusions. His work demonstrated how the Church attempted to reconcile new discoveries with traditional cosmology. Through figures like Kircher, the Tower of the Winds became not just an observational facility, but an intellectual framework, a way of studying the heavens without challenging religious authority. The secret nature of the tower served another purpose beyond avoiding theological controversy. Astronomical knowledge had profound political value. Accurate calendars, the ability to predict eclipses, even understanding celestial navigation, these gave power to those who possessed them. By developing astronomical expertise behind closed doors, the Vatican maintained an advantage in European politics. Knowledge of the heavens translated to power on Earth by the late 17th century. As the scientific revolution gained momentum across Europe, the Vatican faced increasing pressure to reconcile with new astronomical discoveries. The work of Isaac Newton, published in his monumental Principia Mathematica in 1687, provided a mathematical framework for the heliocentric model that was impossible to dismiss as mere theory. The mechanical universe Newton described, governed by universal laws of motion and gravitation, left little room for the Earth-centered cosmos of medieval theology. Gradually, quietly, The work done in the Tower of the Winds and other Vatican astronomical facilities shifted. Without public proclamation, Vatican astronomers began incorporating Copernican and the Newtonian ideas into their calculations. The tower became a place of quiet accommodation where new scientific truths could be accepted in practice, while the Church maintained traditional positions in public dot. This duality reached its height in the 18th century. Pope Benedict XIV, a man of considerable intellectual curiosity, formally removed Copernicus's work from the Index of Forbidden Books in 1758. While not an outright endorsement of heliocentrism, this move signaled the Church's growing acceptance of modern astronomy. The Tower of the Winds now housed work based explicitly on the understanding that Earth orbited the Sun, a complete reversal from the days of Galileo. Yet the secretive nature of Vatican astronomy persisted. The general public remained largely unaware of the sophisticated astronomical work being conducted behind Vatican walls. This secrecy served the Church's need to change gradually, to absorb new scientific understanding without appearing to contradict its earlier positions. The tower represented not just physical infrastructure, but a strategy, change from within, stability in public dot. As the 18th century progressed, the Vatican established new astronomical facilities. The observatory of the Roman College, under Jesuit direction, gained international recognition. New instruments were acquired, including advanced telescopes that could reveal celestial details invisible to earlier generations. Vatican astronomers participated in international scientific efforts, such as the observation of the transits of Venus in 1761 and 1769, crucial for determining the scale of the solar system. Throughout this evolution, the original Tower of the Winds remained a symbol of the Vatican's complex relationship with astronomy. It represented both the Church's need for celestial knowledge and its caution about the theological implications of that knowledge. The tower stood as a physical manifestation of the Vatican's dual approach: scientific inquiry contained within, religious authority. By the early 19th century, the political landscape of Europe had been transformed by a revolution. The Papal States, the Vatican's territorial holdings, were under threat from nationalist movements. In this context, astronomy took on new significance. Scientific achievement became a form of soft power, a way for the diminishing political entity of the Vatican to maintain international relevance and prestige. In 1891, a pivotal moment arrived in the history of Vatican astronomy. Pope Leo XIII officially re-established the Vatican Observatory, the Specola Vaticana, with a public decree that declared the Church and her pastors are not opposed to true and solid science, whether human or divine, but that they embrace it, encourage it, and promote it with the fullest possible dedication. This formal recognition transformed what had long been a secretive pursuit into an official institution. The observatory was initially housed in the Tower of the Winds and the Leonine Tower. Advanced instruments were installed, including a state-of-the-art telescope donated by the Pope himself. No longer would Vatican astronomy operate entirely in the shadows. The Church was now publicly claiming its place in the international scientific community, even as it continued to navigate the theological implications of astronomical discoveries. This transformation reveals the complex motivations behind the Vatican's astronomical tower. Was it built to watch God or the universe? The answer is both, and more besides. The tower represented the Vatican's multifaceted relationship with the cosmos, practical needs for calendar making, theological interest in creation, political utility of scientific prestige, and genuine intellectual curiosity about the heavens. The secret nature of early Vatican astronomy reflected not just caution about theological controversy, but strategic control of valuable knowledge. As the 20th century approached, light pollution in Rome began to interfere with astronomical observations. The Vatican Observatory would eventually relocate to Castel Gandolfo, the papal summer residence outside Rome, and later establish a research center in Arizona. But the original astronomical tower remains, a testament to centuries when the Vatican watched the stars in secret, balancing faith and discovery in its quest to understand the heavens. The tension between religious doctrine and astronomical discovery has defined the Vatican's relationship with the stars from the beginning. When Galileo's telescope revealed mountains on the moon, phases of Venus, and moons orbiting Jupiter, he wasn't simply adding details to the cosmic map. He was challenging a worldview where physical reality and spiritual truth were inseparable. The heavens were supposed to be perfect, unchanging, and centered on Earth, God's special creation. The theological implications of a sun-centered universe with Earth as just another planet were profound and disturbing to church authorities. This conflict wasn't merely about facts versus faith. It struck at the heart of how Scripture should be interpreted. If the Bible described the sun standing still at Joshua's command, but the sun didn't actually move around Earth, what did this mean for biblical authority? Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, who would later lead Galileo's investigation, articulated the concern clearly. To assert that the sun is really fixed in the center of the heavens and that Earth revolves with great speed around the sun is a dangerous thing, not only irritating the theologians and philosophers, but injuring our holy faith and making the sacred Scripture false. Behind closed doors in the Vatican's astronomical tower, this dilemma played out over centuries. How could the Church maintain its theological authority while engaging with astronomical discoveries that seemed to contradict traditional interpretations of Scripture? The solution emerged gradually, a distinction between the purpose of Scripture and the mechanics of nature. As Cardinal Barberini, later Pope Urban VIII, suggested to Galileo, perhaps the Bible tells us how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go. This intellectual compromise developed slowly within Vatican walls. While publicly maintaining traditional positions, Vatican astronomers increasingly worked with heliocentric models that more accurately predicted celestial movements. By the 18th century, books advocating the Copernican system were quietly removed from the index of forbidden books. The Church never announced it had been wrong. Instead, it gradually shifted its position until the controversial view became acceptable. This pattern reveals something crucial about the Vatican's approach to astronomy. Change occurred from within, gradually and discreetly. The astronomical tower served as a buffer zone where new ideas could be explored before being integrated into official doctrine. This allowed the Church to maintain continuity with tradition while slowly adapting to scientific progress. This seeming contradiction, rejecting heliocentrism publicly while using it privately, wasn't mere hypocrisy. but a sophisticated institutional strategy for managing change. The relationship between God and the cosmos was reimagined in this process. Medieval theology had envisioned a hierarchical universe with Earth at the center, surrounded by celestial spheres culminating in the realm of God. This spatial arrangement reinforced theological concepts, humanity at the center of God's concern, with heaven literally above. The new astronomy shattered this physical arrangement, but opened new theological possibilities. Jesuit astronomers pioneered this reinterpretation. They suggested that God's greatness was better demonstrated by the vast cosmos revealed by telescopes than by the smaller Earth-centered universe of ancient cosmology. If the universe was immense beyond imagination, with billions of stars and potentially countless worlds, didn't this make God's power and creativity even more impressive? The theological threat of the new astronomy was gradually transformed into a theological opportunity. This theological adaptation did not occur in isolation. Throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, European intellectual life was transformed by the scientific revolution. The mechanical philosophy advanced by figures like Descartes and Newton described a universe operating according to mathematical laws. Providence was increasingly seen as acting through natural laws rather than through direct divine intervention. Vatican astronomers, particularly Jesuits, participated actively in these intellectual developments, finding ways to reconcile them with Catholic theology. Father Roger Boscovich, a Jesuit mathematician and astronomer working in Rome during the 18th century, exemplified this synthesis. His theory of forces attempted to unify physical understanding of the universe with metaphysical principles. His work demonstrated how Catholic scientists could contribute to modern science while maintaining religious commitments. Within the Vatican's astronomical facilities, Boscovich and others created a space where scientific investigation and religious faith coexisted productively. But astronomy wasn't just about theology, it was also about power. The Vatican's investment in astronomical knowledge served political purposes as well as religious ones. In the age of European colonial expansion, astronomical expertise was essential for navigation, map-making, and establishing accurate calendars. By maintaining advanced astronomical facilities, the Vatican preserved influence in European politics, even as its territorial power diminished. Knowledge of the heavens translated directly to power on earth. The secret nature of early Vatican astronomy reflected this political dimension. Astronomical knowledge wasn't merely controversial theologically. It was strategically valuable. Control over the calendar meant control over religious observances across Catholic Europe. Astronomical expertise enhanced Vatican prestige in diplomatic circles. The tower wasn't just a scientific facility, but a source of soft power in European politics. As the modern era advanced, the Vatican's relationship with astronomy continued to evolve. By the late 19th century, when Pope Leo XIII officially re-established the Vatican Observatory, the Church had largely reconciled itself to modern cosmology. Leo declared that truth cannot contradict truth, meaning that genuine scientific discoveries could not ultimately conflict with properly understood religious doctrine. This principle allowed the Church to embrace astronomy without fear, seeing scientific and religious truth as complementary rather than contradictory. the modern. The Vatican Observatory, staffed largely by Jesuit astronomers with advanced scientific degrees, embodies this reconciliation. These priest scientists work alongside secular colleagues, publishing in peer-reviewed journals and using cutting-edge equipment. Their work ranges from meteorite analysis to cosmology. Far from the secretive astronomy of earlier centuries, today's Vatican astronomers openly participate in the international scientific community, yet traces of the earlier tensions remain. The case of Galileo continues to haunt the relationship between religion and science. Pope John Paul II's formal acknowledgment in 1992 that the Church had erred in its treatment of Galileo marked an important step in healing this historical wound, but questions persist about how religious institutions should respond to scientific discoveries that challenge traditional interpretations of sacred texts. The Vatican's astronomical tower stands as a physical symbol of this complex history, a place where faith and discovery, theology and observation, secrecy and openness have interacted over centuries. It embodies the Vatican's remarkable institutional ability to adapt while maintaining continuity with tradition. Through careful navigation of potentially disruptive discoveries, the Church has preserved its theological core while accommodating scientific progress. Was the Vatican watching God or the universe through its astronomical instruments? The answer reveals itself as a false dichotomy. For the Vatican astronomers, studying the universe was a way of appreciating God's creation. The heavens declared God's glory, as Psalm 19 proclaims. By understanding the mechanisms of celestial motion, they were uncovering the divine architecture of creation. The theological and scientific motivations were inseparable. The story of Vatican astronomy offers deeper insights into how institutions manage the tension between tradition and innovation, rather than simply rejecting new discoveries that challenged established doctrine. The Vatican created spaces, like its astronomical tower, where new ideas could be explored within a framework of traditional authority. Change occurred gradually, maintaining institutional continuity while accommodating new understanding. This pattern extends beyond astronomy to many areas where religious institutions face scientific or cultural challenges. Today's Vatican astronomers continue this tradition of engagement with modern science. Brother Guy Consolmagno, current director of the Vatican Observatory, holds degrees from MIT and is an accomplished planetary scientist who studies meteorites and asteroids. Father Jose Funes, a previous director, is an expert on galaxies. These priest scientists see no contradiction between their religious vocation and their scientific work. As Consolmagno puts it, religion needs science to keep it away from superstition and keep it close to reality, to protect it from creationism, which at the end of the day is a kind of paganism. The Vatican's astronomical facilities have expanded beyond the original tower. The main observatory is now located at Castel Gandolfo, outside Rome, while the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope operates on Mount Graham in Arizona. Using state-of-the-art equipment, Vatican astronomers study everything from star formation to the distribution of galaxies. Their research is published in the same journals as work from secular institutions, subjected to the same peer review process. This modern engagement represents the culmination of a centuries-long process of reconciliation between faith and astronomical discovery. The path from Galileo's trial to today's Vatican observatory wasn't straightforward. It involved theological reinterpretation, institutional adaptation, and careful navigation of potential conflicts. The secretive nature of early Vatican astronomy provided space for this evolution to occur without disrupting the Church's authority, or tradition. The lessons of this history remain relevant in our own time as religious institutions continue to face scientific discoveries that challenge traditional interpretations of sacred texts. From evolution to neuroscience, advances in scientific understanding raise questions about religious doctrines concerning human origins, the soul, and moral responsibility. The Vatican's experience with astronomy suggests that productive engagement, rather than rejection, offers a sustainable path forward. The Vatican's secret astronomy tower embodies this complex legacy, a place where God and the cosmos, faith and discovery, tradition and innovation converged. In its shadowed chambers, priests peered through telescopes at the heavens, seeking understanding of both divine creation and natural law. The knowledge they gathered transformed our understanding of the universe and humanity's place within it. Their story reminds us that the boundaries between science and religion, reason and faith, are more permeable than we often assume. As we contemplate the night sky today, we inherit this dual legacy, the precise measurements of modern astronomy, alongside the ancient human wonder at the cosmic mystery. The Vatican astronomers, working in their secret tower across the centuries, participated in both traditions. They measured the movements of planets while contemplating the divine order of creation. In their story, we find not just a chapter in the history of science, but a window into humanity's enduring quest to understand our place in the cosmos and our relationship with whatever lies beyond. The stars continue their ancient patterns overhead, indifferent to our theological debates and scientific theories. But in human hearts and minds, the questions persist, questions about meaning and purpose that transcend mere physical description. The Vatican's astronomers, from their secret tower to today's modern observatories, have lived within this tension, seeking truth in both the measurable mechanics of the cosmos and the immeasurable mystery of existence. Their story reminds us that looking upward can be both an act of scientific inquiry and a form of prayer, two ways of approaching the same vast reality that surrounds and contains us all. The year is 1600. In Rome's Campo di Fiore, a crowd gathers around a pyre where a man stands bound to a stake. His name is Giordano Bruno, a former Dominican friar whose cosmological speculations have earned him the Church's most severe censure. As flames consume his body, Bruno becomes a martyr, not just to free thought, but to a revolutionary vision of the cosmos. He had dared to suggest that the universe was infinite, containing countless worlds, potentially inhabited beings. For this and other heresies he paid the ultimate price. Bruno's execution casts a long shadow over Vatican astronomy. Though technically condemned for theological heresies rather than astronomical theories, his fate demonstrated the deadly serious nature of cosmological speculation in Counter-Reformation Rome. The boundary between astronomical observation and heretical philosophy was perilously thin. Those who worked within the Vatican's astronomical facilities navigated this boundary with extreme caution, aware that the wrong conclusion or the wrong patron could lead to disaster. The case of Bruno illuminates a paradox at the heart of Vatican astronomy. The same institution that executed Bruno for his cosmic speculations was simultaneously advancing astronomical knowledge through its own careful observations. This contradiction reflected the complex power dynamics within the church hierarchy. Different factions, Dominicans, Jesuits, various cardinal families, and successive popes, held divergent views on how to approach new astronomical discoveries. The story was never as simple as the church versus science. The Jesuits exemplified this complexity. As the intellectual shock troops of the Counter-Reformation, they were charged with defending Catholic orthodoxy against Protestant challenges. Yet they were also sophisticated scholars who valued observation and mathematical precision. Jesuit astronomers like Christopher Clavius recognized the mathematical elegance of the Copernican system while publicly maintaining geocentric views. This strategic ambiguity allowed them to advance astronomical knowledge while avoiding Bruno's fate. Vatican astronomy thus developed a distinctive character, meticulous in observation, cautious in theory. The astronomical tower became a place where data was gathered with precision while interpretations remained flexible. This approach allowed Vatican astronomers to contribute significantly to observational astronomy while navigating theological constraints. They documented solar and lunar eclipses, tracked planetary movements, and cataloged stars with remarkable accuracy, even as they avoided explicit endorsement of the heliocentric model. When Galileo pointed his telescope skyward in 1609, he shattered this delicate balance. His observations of Jupiter's moons, Venus's phases, and the moon's craters provided compelling evidence for the Copernican model. More dangerously, Galileo publicized these findings widely, writing in Italian for a general audience rather than in Latin for scholarly circles. He moved astronomy from the controlled environment of the Vatican's tower into the public square, where its theological implications could not be contained. The Vatican's response to Galileo reveals how it managed threatening knowledge. Initially, curiosity prevailed. Jesuit astronomers at the Roman College confirmed Galileo's observations, and Cardinal Barberini, later Pope Urban VIII, expressed admiration for his work. But as Galileo became more insistent about heliocentrism, especially in his dialogue concerning the two chief world systems, the institutional response hardened. In 1633, he was forced to recant and spent the remainder of his life under house arrest. Yet even as Galileo faced the Inquisition, work continued in the Vatican's astronomical tower. The same institution that silenced Galileo continued gathering the very data that would eventually validate his views. This apparent contradiction reveals a sophisticated institutional strategy. Public suppression of threatening theories coupled with private continuation of valuable observations. The knowledge itself wasn't forbidden, only certain interpretations and their public dissemination. This strategy extended beyond astronomy to other fields where scientific inquiry intersected with theological concerns. The Church maintained extensive collections of texts deemed heretical or dangerous, including works on alchemy, astrology, and natural magic. These were kept in restricted sections of the Vatican Library, accessible only to select scholars with special permission. Knowledge wasn't destroyed but contained, preserved for potential utility. While kept from public circulation, the infamous Index of Forbidden Books, established in 1559, exemplified this approach. Works by Copernicus and later Galileo were placed on the index, technically prohibited to Catholic readers. Yet copies remained in the Vatican Library, available to authorized scholars. The prohibition was less about erasing knowledge than controlling its flow, ensuring that potentially disruptive ideas reached only those deemed intellectually and spiritually prepared to contextualize them properly. Vatican astronomers thus occupied a privileged but precarious position. They had access to forbidden knowledge, books, instruments, and observations that could lead to heretical conclusions. Their work was valuable to the Church for practical purposes like calendar, reform, and mathematical education. Yet they remained under constant scrutiny, their conclusions subject to theological evaluation. Their astronomical tower was both observatory and panopticon, a place where the heavens were watched. But the watchers themselves were also under observation. This tension produced a distinctive scientific culture within Vatican walls. Astronomical work proceeded through indirect approaches and strategic ambiguity. The Tychonic system, a compromise model where planets orbited the Sun while the Sun orbited Earth, gained popularity among Vatican astronomers in the decades after Galileo's trial. This model preserved Earth's special status while accommodating observational evidence for planetary movements. It represented a scientific compromise in service of theological requirements. The suppression of certain astronomical theories didn't prevent substantial scientific progress within Vatican astronomy. Throughout the 17th century, Jesuit astronomers made significant contributions to observational astronomy. They tracked comets, documented sunspots, and refined lunar maps. Father Giovanni Battista Riccioli published his Almagestum Novum in 1651, a comprehensive astronomical work that, while officially rejecting heliocentrism, nevertheless presented it accurately alongside detailed observations of the moon and planets. Father Athanasius Kircher, that Baroque polymath who established his museum in the Roman College, embodied the paradoxical freedom within constraint that characterized Vatican science. His wide-ranging works explored everything from magnetism to Egyptian hieroglyphs, often combining rigorous observation with speculative theory. Though officially adhering to geocentrism, Kircher's cosmic vision incorporated new astronomical discoveries within a theologically acceptable framework. His intellectual flexibility demonstrated how knowledge could advance even under doctrinal restrictions. By the 18th century, the Vatican's approach to astronomical heresy was evolving. Pope Benedict XIV, a scholar himself, reformed the Index of Forbidden Books in 1758, removing the general prohibition on works advocating heliocentrism. This quiet reversal, made without fanfare or acknowledgement of error, exemplified how the Church managed potentially disruptive knowledge. Change occurred gradually, presented as clarification rather than contradiction of earlier positions. The forbiddance became permitted through reinterpretation rather than revolution. This pattern, suppression followed by gradual, unacknowledged acceptance, characterized the Vatican's management of challenging astronomical discoveries for centuries. The Church's eventual embrace of scientific concepts it had once condemned never came, through dramatic reversal, but through slow institutional evolution. The astronomical tower witnessed this process unfold across generations of observers, as working assumptions shifted while official doctrines remained seemingly constant. The Vatican's complex relationship with forbidden astronomical knowledge reveals something profound about how institutions manage potentially disruptive information. Rather than simple opposition between progressive science and regressive religion, we find a sophisticated interplay of containment and utilization. Knowledge deemed dangerous wasn't eliminated but channeled, directed toward institutional needs, while its potentially destabilizing aspects were controlled through access restrictions and interpretive frameworks. The astronomical tower, thus, served as a knowledge filter, a place where observations entered but emerged transformed, aligned with institutional requirements. Within its walls, Vatican astronomers performed intellectual alchemy, transmuting potentially heretical observations into theologically acceptable forms. This process wasn't merely censorship, but translation between different systems of meaning, from the mathematical language of astronomy to the symbolic language of theology. By the 19th century, as European society underwent dramatic secular transformation, the Vatican's relationship with forbidden knowledge shifted again. Pope Leo XIII's establishment of the modern Vatican Observatory in 1891 represented a new approach, not just tolerating astronomical research, but actively promoting it as compatible with Catholic faith. The forbiddens had become not merely permitted, but celebrated, positioned as evidence of the Church's enlightened engagement with modern science. Yet even this modern openness contained echoes of earlier strategies. The Vatican Observatory's focus on areas like meteoritics and stellar classification carefully avoided the most theologically sensitive topics in astronomy. The observatory's work, while fully scientific, still reflected institutional priorities and concerns. The legacy of forbidden knowledge persisted in subtle boundaries around certain questions, boundaries that guided research without explicitly constraining it. The story of Vatican astronomy thus reveals the malleable nature of forbidden knowledge. What constituted dangerous ideas changed across centuries, reflecting shifts in both scientific understanding and theological interpretation. The astronomers who worked in the Vatican's tower participated in this evolution, sometimes pushing boundaries, sometimes reinforcing them. Their observations, records, and calculations formed a continuous thread through these transformations, a body of knowledge that outlasted the prohibitions once surrounding it. Today, as the modern Vatican Observatory conducts research using advanced telescopes and collaborates with secular institutions worldwide, the legacy of forbidden knowledge remains relevant. It reminds us that knowledge is never neutral, but always embedded in power structures and meaning systems. The path from Bruno's Pyre to today's Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope reflects not just scientific progress, but evolving relationships between authority, truth, and the human quest to understand our place in the cosmos. On a crisp autumn night in 1577, a bright comet appeared in the European sky. Across the continent, observers tracked its movement with a mixture of scientific curiosity and superstitious dread. Comets had long been interpreted as divine messengers, harbingers of disaster. But in the Vatican's astronomical tower, a different approach was taking shape. There, observers meticulously recorded the comet's position against the background stars, measuring its apparent path through the heavens with mathematical precision. The Vatican's records of this comet, preserved in its archives, reveal a fascinating duality in the Church's approach to celestial phenomena. The same comet that inspired apocalyptic sermons from pulpits across Europe was, within the tower, the subject of careful measurement and calculation. These parallel responses, public interpretation through theological symbolism alongside private analysis through mathematical astronomy, characterize Vatican astronomy for centuries. Comets held special significance in this dual approach. Their sudden appearance and dramatic form naturally invited symbolic interpretation. Throughout medieval and early modern Europe, comets were widely seen as divine warnings, their fiery tails pointing toward regions destined for disaster. Church authorities often reinforced these interpretations, using celestial signs to encourage moral reform among the faithful. Yet within the Vatican's astronomical facilities, comets were simultaneously subjected to scientific analysis, their paths calculated and catalogued without reference to supernatural meaning. This pattern extended to other celestial events. Solar and lunar eclipses, conjunctions of planets, and new stars, novae and supernova, received the same dual treatment. Public interpretation through the lens of providence, alongside private documentation through the lens of mathematics. The Vatican's astronomical records thus contain a remarkable juxtaposition, precise measurements alongside notes on theological significance, celestial mechanics alongside divine messaging. The 1577 comet proved particularly significant for European astronomy. Tycho Brahe's precise observations demonstrated that the comet moved beyond the moon, contradicting the Aristotelian belief that comets were atmospheric phenomena. This realization contributed to the breakdown of the classical distinction between the perfect, unchanging heavens and the imperfect, changeable earth. Vatican astronomers, corresponding with colleagues across Europe, were well aware of these implications, even as the Church maintained official Aristotelian positions. The Vatican's astronomical records reveal another fascinating pattern: selective attention to celestial phenomena based on theological significance. Alignments involving Venus received particular scrutiny, reflecting the planet's association with the Virgin Mary in Catholic symbolic tradition. The morning and evening appearances of Venus, the same planet in different positions relative to the Sun, were meticulously documented, their timing incorporated into liturgical calendars and feast day calculations. This selective focus created a unique astronomical archive within Vatican walls. Certain celestial events were documented with extraordinary precision over centuries, creating data sets of remarkable historical depth. Modern astronomers have used these Vatican records to track long-term astronomical phenomena, from solar activity cycles to the subtle changes in planetary orbits. Knowledge gathered for theological purposes now serves purely scientific ends, an ironic reversal of the pattern that once saw astronomical observation subordinated to religious interpretation. The astronomical tower itself incorporated symbolic elements alongside its scientific functions. Its orientation aligned with significant celestial directions, its windows positioned to capture particular astronomical events. On the spring equinox, Sunlight would fall on specific markers, connecting the physical structure to cosmic rhythms. This integration of symbolic and functional design reflected the dual nature of Vatican astronomy, simultaneously a scientific pursuit and a religious practice. Perhaps the most dramatic celestial events recorded in Vatican archives are total solar eclipses. These rare phenomena, where day briefly turns to night as the moon completely covers the sun, naturally inspired awe and religious interpretation. Yet Vatican astronomers approached eclipses with remarkable scientific sophistication, calculating their timing with increasing precision across the centuries. Their records show growing understanding of the mechanics behind these events, even as the Church continued to present eclipses to the public as signs of divine power. The Great Comet of 1680 provides another window into this duality. Visible even in daylight at its brightest, this spectacular comet inspired apocalyptic fears across Europe. Preachers interpreted it as a sign of divine judgment, while popular broadsheets depicted it hovering ominously over cities soon to face disaster. Within the Vatican's astronomical facilities, however, the same comet was the subject of careful observation and mathematical analysis. Isaac Newton would later use these observations, including those from Vatican astronomers, to demonstrate that comets follow predictable orbital paths governed by the same gravitational laws as planets. This scientific approach to celestial phenomena had practical applications beyond theoretical understanding. Vatican astronomers used their observations to create increasingly accurate calendars and navigational tables. Their calculations of Easter dates, a complex determination based on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox, required precise understanding of lunar and solar movements. Maritime navigation, increasingly important as European powers established global trade networks, relied on astronomical tables that benefited from Vatican observations. The Church thus maintained two parallel discourses about the heavens: a public language of signs, wonders, and divine messages, alongside a private language of mathematics, measurement, and mechanical regularity. This duality wasn't necessarily hypocritical, but reflected different audiences and purposes. Theological interpretations served pastoral and social functions, while scientific analysis served practical and intellectual needs. The Vatican's astronomical tower housed both approaches, sometimes in the same individuals. The records reveal that Vatican astronomers were particularly attentive to certain celestial alignments and conjunctions, moments when planets appeared close together in the sky. Some of these alignments held special theological significance. The conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, which occurs approximately every 20 years, received careful documentation. Some scholars have suggested that such a conjunction may have been the Star of Bethlehem that guided the Magi in the biblical nativity story. Vatican astronomers tracked these conjunctions across centuries, noting their positions and visibility conditions. Stellar observations also feature prominently in Vatican astronomical records. Well before the invention of photography, Vatican astronomers created detailed star charts, documenting the positions and apparent magnitudes of visible stars. These charts served both scientific and navigational purposes. They also allowed for the detection of new stars, novae, and supernova that appeared suddenly where none had been visible before. Such events posed particular challenges to Aristotelian cosmology, which held that the heavens were perfect and unchanging. The nova of 1572, later known as Tycho's supernova after its most famous observer, received significant attention in Vatican records. This new star, bright enough to be visible in daylight at its peak, directly contradicted the Aristotelian doctrine of celestial immutability. Vatican astronomers documented its position, brightness, and gradual fading over months. Their records reveal an awareness of its revolutionary implications alongside careful avoidance of explicit challenges to official cosmology. Solar observations formed another major component of Vatican astronomy. Sunspots, dark regions on the sun's surface, were regularly documented after telescopic observation became possible in the early 17th century. Galileo was among the first to systematically observe sunspots, using them to demonstrate that the sun rotated and was not a perfect, unblemished sphere as Aristotelian cosmology required. Vatican astronomers continued these observations, creating one of the longest continuous records of solar activity in scientific history. This solar record has proven invaluable to modern science. The 11-year solar cycle, the regular pattern of increasing and decreasing sunspot activity, was identified partly through analysis of these historical observations. Long-term variations in solar activity, such as the Maunder minimum of 1645 to 1715, when sunspots became exceedingly rare, are documented in Vatican records. These observations now inform our understanding of climate patterns and solar physics, their original theological context largely forgotten. The Vatican's astronomical records also reveal a sophisticated understanding of astronomical instruments and observational techniques. Detailed descriptions of quadrants, astrolabes, armillary spheres, and later telescopes demonstrate the technical expertise of Vatican astronomers. They were often at the forefront of instrumental innovation, corresponding with craftsmen and scientists across Europe to obtain the latest equipment. The astronomical tower housed an impressive collection of these instruments, regularly updated as technology advanced. Planetary observations received particular attention. The movements of Mars, with its noticeably non-circular path across the sky, posed challenges to geometric models of the cosmos. Vatican records show increasingly precise tracking of Mars's positions, contributing to the data that Johannes Kepler would use to formulate his laws of planetary motion. Though Kepler worked outside Vatican circles, the observations gathered within the astronomical tower indirectly supported his revolutionary insights into the elliptical nature of planetary orbits. The Vatican's interpretations of celestial phenomena evolved over centuries, reflecting broader shifts in both theology and science. Early records often include explicit references to divine significance alongside mathematical calculations. A solar eclipse might be precisely timed and measured, but also interpreted as a reminder of Christ's crucifixion when darkness fell at midday. Gradually, these theological interpretations became less prominent in technical documents, though they continued in public communications. By the 18th century, Vatican astronomical records show increasing separation between scientific observation and theological interpretation. The records become more technically focused, filled with precise measurements and mathematical calculations with minimal reference to divine significance. This shift reflects the growing professionalization of astronomy as a discipline and the increasing influence of Enlightenment approaches to natural phenomena. Even within Vatican walls, yet the Church never entirely abandoned the symbolic reading of the heavens. Celestial imagery remained prominent in religious art, architecture, and ritual. The dome of St. Peter's Basilica, with its golden stars against a blue background, evokes the heavens as understood through both astronomical observation and theological symbolism. The Vatican's astronomical tower thus contributed to two parallel traditions: the mathematical understanding of celestial mechanics and the symbolic interpretation of cosmic meaning. This duality persists in subtle ways even in modern Vatican astronomy. Today's Vatican Observatory continues scientific research using advanced technologies, participating fully in the international astronomical community. Yet its mission statement explicitly connects this work to broader questions of meaning and purpose. The study of the cosmos remains, for the Vatican, both a scientific pursuit and a form of what Jesuit astronomers have called finding God in all things, including the most distant galaxies revealed by modern telescopes. The records kept within the Vatican's astronomical tower thus tell a more complex story than either pure science or mere superstition. They document a continuous tradition of watching the heavens through multiple lenses: mathematical, philosophical, and theological. These observations, accumulated over centuries, form a unique archive that bridges different ways of knowing. In their precise measurements and careful notations, we find evidence of human efforts to comprehend the cosmos through whatever intellectual tools were available, always reaching for understanding that transcended immediate practical concerns. In the quiet corridors of the Vatican, far from the ceremonial spaces where popes conducted the public business of the Church, a distinctive type of cleric pursued his vocation. These men were the astronomers of God, priests who divided their time between religious obligations and celestial observations. They lived between worlds, their feet on earth, while their eyes and minds reached toward the heavens. Their stories reveal the human dimension of Vatican astronomy, the individual seekers behind the institutional facade. Father Christopher Clavius exemplifies this tradition. Born in Germany in 1538, Clavius joined the newly formed Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, and eventually became the leading mathematician and astronomer at the Roman College. His most significant public work was reforming the calendar for Pope Gregory XIII, creating the Gregorian calendar we still use today. This practical achievement required sophisticated astronomical knowledge, precise observations, and complex calculations to align human timekeeping with celestial cycles. Behind this practical work lay a more profound intellectual journey. Clavius began his career as a staunch defender of Ptolemaic cosmology, with Earth fixed at the center of creation. His early writings dismissed Copernican heliocentrism as both physically absurd and theologically dangerous, yet as observational evidence mounted, Clavius's position evolved. By the end of his life, after telescopic observations had revealed new celestial phenomena, his certainty had eroded. In his final publications, he acknowledged that astronomers must consider how the heavens can be arranged so that these phenomena can be explained. This intellectual flexibility within institutional constraints characterized many Vatican astronomers. They walked a narrow path between observational truth and doctrinal requirements, finding creative ways to advance knowledge while maintaining orthodox positions. Their private correspondence often revealed more openness to new ideas than their public writings, suggesting an inner world more complex than their official roles might indicate. Father Giovanni Battista Riccioli represents another variation on this theme. A Jesuit astronomer working in the generation after Galileo's condemnation, Riccioli produced a magnificent Almagestum Novum in 1651, a comprehensive astronomical work that officially defended geocentrism while meticulously documenting the evidence for heliocentrism. Riccioli named craters on the moon after prominent astronomers, placing Copernicus and Kepler in prominent positions, despite officially rejecting their cosmological models. Riccioli's work embodies a strategic ambiguity that allowed Vatican astronomy to advance despite theological constraints. His lunar map, with its careful documentation of craters, mountains, and Maria, the dark plains once thought to be seas, became a standard reference for generations of astronomers. His catalog of stars and double stars contributed to observational knowledge regardless of cosmological frameworks. Through such focused empirical work, Vatican astronomers built a foundation of observational data that would eventually support theoretical innovations, often by astronomers working outside church constraints. The personal faith of these priest astronomers adds another dimension to their story. Far from seeing tension between their religious vocation and scientific work, most experienced them as complementary aspects of a unified worldview. They understood astronomical observation as a form of devotion, a way of appreciating divine creation through careful study of its mechanisms. Their meticulous documentation of celestial phenomena reflected both scientific discipline and religious reverence. Father Angelo Secchi represents this integration of faith and science in the modern era. Born in 1818, Secchi became director of the observatory at the Roman College and pioneered the field of astrophysics, the study of the physical nature of celestial bodies rather than just their positions and movements. He was among the first to use spectroscopy to analyze the chemical composition of stars, developing a stellar classification system that laid groundwork for our modern understanding of stellar evolution. Secchi worked during a turbulent period in Vatican history. The Papal States were crumbling under pressure from Italian unification movements, and the Church's temporal power was in decline. Yet Secchi maintained international scientific relationships across political and religious boundaries, corresponding with astronomers throughout Europe and America. His scientific reputation helped maintain Vatican prestige during this period of political marginalization. Throughout his scientific career, Secchi remained a devoted priest who saw no contradiction between his faith and his pioneering astrophysical research. He wrote that studying the cosmos revealed the work of an intelligence that has arranged everything with order, harmony, and wisdom. For Secchi and many Vatican astronomers, scientific discovery deepened rather than threatened religious faith, revealing the subtlety and complexity of creation. The personal papers of these Vatican astronomers, preserved in church archives, reveal individuals grappling with the same questions that occupied their secular colleagues. but within a distinctive theological framework. They worried about observational accuracy, debated theoretical models, and celebrated new discoveries. They also reflected on how these astronomical findings connected to their understanding of God, creation, and humanity's place in the cosmos. The astronomical tower thus housed not just instruments and observations, but human lives dedicated to understanding the heavens. Generation after generation, these priest astronomers maintained a continuous tradition of celestial observation within Vatican walls. Their individual stories merged into an institutional memory, each building upon the work of predecessors while adapting to new discoveries and technologies. Father Johann Hagen, who directed the Vatican Observatory in the early 20th century, exemplifies this continuity. Born in Austria in 1847, Hagen became a Jesuit and specialized in astronomy, eventually taking charge of the Vatican's astronomical work. His research focused on variable stars, stars that change in brightness over time. This phenomenon, inexplicable in the old cosmology of perfect, unchanging heavens, had become a standard subject for astronomical research by Hagen's time, demonstrating how completely Vatican astronomy had integrated modern understanding of a dynamic cosmos. Hagen's career spanned a period of dramatic technological change in astronomy. Photography was transforming the field, allowing for more precise and permanent recording of celestial phenomena than visual observation could provide. The Vatican Observatory, under Hagen's direction, embraced these new techniques, establishing a photographic library of stellar images that continues to serve as a valuable historical record of the night sky. The personal correspondence between Vatican astronomers and their secular colleagues reveals another important aspect of their work. They functioned as bridges between religious and scientific communities. Through letters, visits, and later published papers, they participated in the international exchange of astronomical knowledge. They attended conferences, contributed to collaborative projects, and shared observational data. This scientific engagement sometimes continued even during periods of political tension between the Vatican and secular governments. Father Georges Lemaître represents perhaps the most dramatic example of a Vatican-connected astronomer whose work transformed our understanding of the cosmos. Though not directly employed by the Vatican Observatory, Lemaître was a Belgian Catholic priest and physicist whose theoretical work in the 1920s and 30s laid the groundwork for what would later be called the Big Bang Theory. Lemaître proposed that the universe began as a primeval atom that expanded to create space and time, a concept remarkably aligned with the Genesis account of creation from nothing. Lemaître insisted, however, that his scientific theory should be evaluated on its physical merits rather than its theological implications. When Pope Pius XII attempted to connect the Big Bang Theory to Catholic doctrine in a 1951 address, Lemaître privately urged caution, concerned that scientific theories should not be prematurely annexed to theological positions. His approach exemplified the sophisticated relationship between faith and science that characterized the best of Vatican astronomy, recognizing both connections and boundaries between these domains of knowledge. The modern Vatican Observatory continues this tradition through figures like Father George Coyne, who directed the observatory from 1978 to 2006. an astrophysicist with a Ph.D. from Georgetown University. Coyne specialized in polarimetry, the measurement of polarized light from celestial objects. Under his leadership, the Vatican Observatory established the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, VATT, in Arizona, partnering with the University of Arizona to access better observing conditions than Rome's light-polluted skies could provide. Coyne, like his predecessors, navigated the intersection of astronomy and theology with sophistication. He spoke frequently about the compatibility of evolutionary science with Catholic faith and engaged openly with questions about extraterrestrial life and its theological implications. His approach reflected the long evolution of Vatican astronomy, from its cautious beginnings to its modern openness, an evolution driven by generations of priest astronomers who found ways to advance knowledge while honoring tradition. Brother Guy Consolmagno, the current director of the Vatican Observatory, continues this legacy. With degrees from MIT and the University of Arizona, Consolmagno specializes in the study of meteorites and asteroids, small bodies that reveal the early history of our solar system. His scientific work, published in peer-reviewed journals and presented at international conferences, stands alongside his religious vocation as a Jesuit brother. Consolmagno's public outreach efforts, including books for general audiences and frequent media appearances, have made him the most visible Vatican astronomer in recent history. His approach to the relationship between science and faith emphasizes that science is a human activity done by humans, recognizing that scientific inquiry is embedded in broader human questions about meaning and purpose. This perspective connects today's Vatican Observatory to its long tradition of seeing astronomy as both technical pursuit and contemplative practice. The astronomers who worked in the Vatican's tower over centuries were neither simple instruments of institutional policy nor mere scientists who happened to wear clerical collars. They were complex individuals navigating multiple identities and obligations as priests committed to religious tradition, as astronomers dedicated to observational accuracy, and as thinkers engaged with fundamental questions about the cosmos and humanity's place within it. Their story reveals the oversimplification of narratives that posit necessary conflict between religion and science. Within the Vatican's astronomical tower, these domains were neither entirely separate nor completely integrated, but engaged in ongoing conversation. The priest astronomers who worked there developed sophisticated approaches to potential tensions, finding ways to advance observational knowledge while maintaining theological commitments. The blurred line between theology and cosmology that characterized their work has modern parallels in ongoing discussions about the origins of the universe, the possibility of extraterrestrial life, and the place of consciousness in a material cosmos. Today's Vatican astronomers continue to engage with such questions, drawing on both scientific methodology and theological reflection. Their dual approach reminds us that the most profound cosmic questions have never been confined to a single intellectual framework. The astronomers of God who worked in the Vatican's tower thus offer a more nuanced model of the relationship between faith and discovery than popular narratives often provide. They were neither closed-minded reactionaries nor secret rebels against religious authority, but thoughtful individuals seeking truth through multiple complementary approaches. Their legacy lives on in both the scientific data they accumulated and the intellectual tradition they established, a tradition that continues to watch the heavens with both calculating precision and wondering reverence. In the shadow of St. Peter's Dome, the old astronomical tower stands as a silent witness to centuries of cosmic observation. Its stones have absorbed the whispers of priests discussing planetary movements, the scratch of quills recording stellar positions, and the quiet adjustments of telescopes aimed at distant nebulae. But the tower's influence extends far beyond its physical walls. Like ripples from a stone dropped in still water, the astronomical knowledge gathered within this structure has spread outward, touching scientific understanding, political power, and cultural imagination across the globe. The most immediate legacy of Vatican astronomy appears in our measurement of time itself. The Gregorian calendar, commissioned by Pope Gregory XIII and implemented in 1582, remains the international civil standard. This calendar, created through astronomical calculations performed in Vatican facilities, governs global commerce, diplomatic relations, and daily life. Every time we write a date, we acknowledge, however unconsciously, the legacy of those priest astronomers who meticulously tracked the sun's annual path to create a more accurate timekeeping system. This calendrical achievement represented more than mere technical precision. It demonstrated the Vatican's aspiration to universal authority, the power to define time itself for the entire world. When Gregory XIII promulgated the new calendar, he did so not just for Catholic Europe, but with the expectation that all nations would eventually adopt it. This cosmological imperialism reflected the Church's view of itself as a universal institution, its authority extending to the very framework within which human history unfolded. Protestant countries initially rejected the Gregorian reform precisely because they recognized this power dimension. England and its colonies, including what would become the United States, continued using the Julian calendar until 1752, nearly 2 centuries after Catholic Europe had switched. This calendrical divide symbolized deeper religious and political divisions. Time itself became contested territory, with different Christian denominations literally living in different days. The Vatican's astronomical tower had inadvertently created a temporal schism that paralleled the theological one. Beyond timekeeping, Vatican astronomy influenced the development of scientific institutions worldwide. The model of the observatory, as a dedicated research facility with permanent instruments and continuous observational records, spread from Rome across Europe. As national scientific academies emerged during the scientific revolution, they often adopted organizational patterns pioneered within Vatican walls. The astronomical tower represented an early version of the modern research institute, a space where specialized knowledge could be cultivated across generations. The Jesuits, who staffed many Vatican astronomical facilities, became particularly important vectors for this institutional diffusion. As they established colleges throughout Europe, Asia, and the Americas, they often included astronomical observatories modeled on those in Rome. In Beijing, Jesuit astronomers like Matteo Ricci brought European astronomical knowledge to the Chinese imperial court, while simultaneously transmitting Chinese observations back to the Vatican. Similar exchanges occurred in India, Japan, and the Americas, creating a global network of astronomical observation coordinated, at least loosely, from Rome. This scientific diplomacy served political ends as well as intellectual ones. Astronomical expertise became a form of soft power, opening doors for Vatican influence in distant courts and cultures. When Jesuit astronomers impressed Chinese emperors with accurate eclipse predictions, they gained opportunities to promote Catholic missionary work. When Vatican-trained astronomers helped establish national observatories in South American countries, they strengthened cultural and political ties between those nations and Rome. The heavens became a realm where the Church could maintain influence, even as its terrestrial power diminished. The astronomical data gathered within the Vatican's tower also contributed to revolutionary scientific developments that transformed our understanding of the cosmos. Hans Kepler used observational data, some of it from Vatican sources, to formulate his laws of planetary motion. Isaac Newton incorporated astronomical observations, including those of comets recorded by Vatican astronomers, in developing his theory of universal gravitation. Though these thinkers worked outside Vatican control, their revolutionary insights built upon observational foundations that included centuries of careful documentation by priest-astronomers. This scientific contribution represented a paradoxical legacy. The same institution that had silenced Galileo had also, through its methodical observational work, helped create conditions for the triumph of the very cosmological model it had condemned. Vatican astronomers, through their precise documentation of celestial phenomena, had unknowingly gathered evidence that would ultimately support heliocentrism, and later, the infinite universe of modern cosmology. The tower had produced knowledge that transcended its own institutional constraints. The Vatican's astronomical work influenced cultural imagination as well as scientific understanding. The image of priests scanning the heavens for divine messages captivated artistic and literary minds. In fiction, poetry, and eventually film, the figure of the Vatican astronomer became a symbol of the meeting point between ancient faith and modern science. This cultural legacy includes both reverent depictions of wise priest-scientists and darker portrayals of the Church seeking cosmic power through celestial knowledge. This cultural impact reveals another dimension of the tower's legacy, its role in shaping how we imagine the relationship between religion and science. The popular narrative of inevitable conflict between these domains, exemplified by the Galileo affair, coexists with counter-narratives of potential harmony, represented by figures like Father Georges Lemaître, the priest-physicist who first proposed what would become the Big Bang Theory. The Vatican's astronomical tower stands at the fault line between these competing visions, its complex history resisting simplistic interpretations. Behind the public legacy of Vatican astronomy lies a more secretive dimension, the strategic use of astronomical knowledge for diplomatic and intelligence purposes. Throughout its history, the Church maintained networks of correspondents who reported on celestial events observed around the world. These reports, ostensibly gathered for scientific purposes, often contained valuable information about political and military developments in distant regions. A Jesuit reporting on an eclipse observed in China might include observations about imperial court politics. An account of a meteor sighting from colonial Mexico might mention local unrest. This intelligence function remained largely invisible in official histories, but represented a significant aspect of the tower's legacy. The Vatican's astronomical network served as an early global information gathering system, providing church authorities with detailed knowledge about far-flung regions. This information advantage translated into diplomatic and political influence, allowing papal representatives to negotiate from positions of surprising knowledge about local conditions. The eyes that watched the heavens also, inevitably, observed the earth. The secretive nature of early Vatican astronomy has fueled centuries of speculation about hidden knowledge locked within church archives. Persistent rumors suggest that the Vatican possesses astronomical records documenting anomalous celestial phenomena, observations that might challenge conventional scientific understanding if revealed. These rumors range from relatively mundane claims about superior star catalogs to fantastical suggestions about evidence of extraterrestrial visitation recorded by medieval observers. Asterisk, while most such claims remain firmly in the realm of conspiracy theory, they reflect a broader truth about the tower's legacy. For centuries, the Vatican controlled access to substantial astronomical knowledge, releasing it according to institutional priorities rather than scientific openness. This created conditions where speculation about hidden knowledge could flourish. The astronomical tower thus generated not just scientific data, but an enduring aura of mystery about what might remain concealed within Vatican vaults. The modern Vatican Observatory represents a dramatic evolution in this legacy of secrecy and revelation. Today's observatory operates with remarkable transparency, publishing research in peer-reviewed journals, collaborating openly with secular institutions, and engaging actively with public outreach. This transformation reflects broader changes in both the Church's approach to science and in scientific culture itself. The tension between institutional control and open inquiry that characterized earlier Vatican astronomy has largely resolved in favor of the latter. Yet traces of the older pattern persist in public fascination with the Vatican's astronomical activities. News reports about the observatory frequently adopt tones of surprise or suspicion, as though the very existence of Vatican telescopes suggests hidden agendas. The legacy of centuries when astronomical knowledge was tightly controlled continues to shape public perception, even as the modern observatory operates with standard scientific openness. The tower casts a long shadow, even over institutions that have moved beyond its walls. The scientific legacy of Vatican astronomy extends into cutting-edge contemporary research. The Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope in Arizona, with its innovative lightweight mirror design, has contributed to studies of stellar formation, galactic structure, and near-Earth asteroids. The Vatican Observatory Research Group participates in international projects, exploring fundamental questions about cosmic origins and evolution. These modern contributions build upon the centuries-long observational tradition established within the original astronomical tower. This contemporary work often focuses on questions with profound theological implications, continuing the tower's legacy of engagement with the intersection of scientific cosmology and religious understanding. Research on extraterrestrial life, cosmic evolution, and the origins of the universe inevitably raises questions about humanity's place in creation and the nature of divine action. Vatican astronomers approach these questions with both scientific rigor and theological sophistication, maintaining the dual perspective that characterized their predecessors in the Tower. The political legacy of Vatican astronomy has evolved dramatically over centuries. What began as an expression of universal authority, the power to define time and interpret celestial signs for all Christendom, has transformed into a more subtle form of influence through scientific contribution and cultural engagement. Today's Vatican Observatory serves as a bridge between religious and scientific communities, facilitating dialogue on questions where these domains intersect. This diplomatic function, though very different from the power politics of earlier centuries, continues the Tower's legacy of mediating between worldviews. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Vatican's astronomical tower lies in its demonstration that institutions can change their relationship with knowledge over time. The same organization that once suppressed Copernican theory now operates telescopes that explore a universe whose basic structure Copernicus only began to glimpse. This evolution occurred not through revolutionary rupture, but through gradual transformation, a process visible in the Tower's centuries of astronomical records, which show theological interpretations slowly giving way to purely scientific analysis. This pattern of institutional adaptation offers broader historical lessons about how organizations navigate disruptive knowledge. Rather than simple opposition or unqualified embrace, the Vatican's response to astronomical discoveries that challenged traditional cosmology involved containment, reinterpretation, and eventually integration. The astronomical tower provided a controlled space where potentially threatening knowledge could be managed until it could be absorbed into the institution's worldview. This strategy of managed transition allowed the Church to maintain continuity with tradition while accommodating scientific advancement. The legacy of Vatican astronomy thus extends beyond specific scientific contributions to encompass this model of institutional evolution in the face of challenging knowledge. As contemporary societies grapple with the disruptive potential of artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and other emerging technologies, the Tower's history offers insights into how institutions might navigate between uncritical techno-optimism and reflexive resistance to change. The Vatican's centuries-long journey from Galileo's condemnation to operating advanced telescopes suggests possibilities for maintaining core values while adapting to new understanding. For astronomers worldwide, the Vatican's observational records represent a unique legacy, an unbroken chain of celestial documentation stretching back centuries. These records, preserved in church archives, provide invaluable data for studying long-term astronomical phenomena, changes in stellar brightness, the paths of comets, cycles of solar activity. All these and more can be traced through Vatican observations that predate modern astronomical institutions by centuries. This continuity of observation represents a scientific treasure of incalculable value. The Tower has left a more ambiguous legacy in the realm of public understanding of science. On one hand, the Galileo affair became a cautionary tale about institutional resistance to scientific discovery frequently invoked in contemporary debates about science and society. On the other hand, The Church's eventual reconciliation with modern astronomy demonstrated the possibility of integrating scientific understanding with older frameworks of meaning. The tower's legacy includes both moments of conflict and models, a potential harmony between scientific advancement and traditional worldviews. For the Catholic Church itself, astronomical research has provided both challenges and opportunities. Challenges, as discoveries repeatedly forced reconsideration of traditional interpretations of Scripture and doctrine. Opportunities, as the Church's willingness to sponsor astronomical research demonstrated its commitment to truth-seeking beyond narrow dogmatism. The tower's legacy within Catholicism includes both the institutional trauma of the Galileo affair and the institutional pride of contributing meaningfully to human understanding of the cosmos. This complex legacy continues to unfold in our own time. As astronomical discovery pushes ever deeper into cosmic origins and structure, new questions emerge about the relationship between scientific cosmology and religious understanding of creation. Vatican astronomers engage directly with these questions, continuing the centuries-long conversation between faith and discovery that began in the tower. Their work represents not just scientific research, but an ongoing negotiation between ancient tradition and emerging knowledge. The stones of the old astronomical tower have witnessed this entire journey from an Earth-centered cosmos bounded by crystalline spheres to a vast universe of billions of galaxies stretching across unimaginable distances. Within its walls, generations of observers recorded the evidence that would ultimately transform human understanding of our cosmic position. They watched the heavens change not in themselves, but in human comprehension, as observation gradually revealed a universe far more vast and dynamic than their predecessors had imagined. This tower, built to track celestial movements for calendar reform, inadvertently became a witness to cosmic revolution. The observations gathered within its walls contributed to a transformation in human understanding more profound than its builders could have anticipated. From this restricted space, with its narrow windows oriented toward specific celestial paths, emerged data that would help shatter the boundaries of the medieval cosmos and open human imagination to the infinite reaches of space we now contemplate. The tower's greatest legacy may be this unintended contribution to cosmic understanding that transcended its original purpose. In the cool pre-dawn darkness, a Jesuit astronomer adjusts his telescope on the roof of the Vatican observatory. Above him spreads a canopy of stars, the same stars that human eyes have watched with wonder since our species first looked upward, yet now viewed through instruments that reveal their true nature as distant suns, many far larger and more powerful than our own. The astronomer, trained in both theology and astrophysics, prepares to document a variable star's fluctuating brightness. His actions bridge centuries of tradition with cutting-edge science, continuing a pattern established within the Vatican's astronomical tower long ago. This scene encapsulates the fundamental question at the heart of Vatican astronomy. Were they watching God or the universe? The question implies a dichotomy, a choice between religious devotion and scientific observation. But the history of the astronomical tower suggests a more complex reality. For the priests who studied the heavens within its walls, watching the universe was a way of watching God, not seeking direct divine manifestation in celestial events, but discerning the mathematical patterns that revealed divine creative intelligence. This perspective emerges clearly in the writings of Jesuit astronomer Christopher Clavius, who led the calendar reform under Pope Gregory XIII. Clavius wrote that astronomers demonstrate the admirable construction of the celestial bodies and their motions, revealing how great is the power, wisdom, and benignity of God the Creator. For Clavius and his successors, astronomical observation constituted a form of natural theology, discerning divine attributes through careful study of creation. They watched the universe to better understand its creator, yet this seemingly harmonious relationship between astronomical observation and religious understanding became complicated as new discoveries challenged traditional cosmology. When telescopes revealed that celestial bodies were not perfect spheres, when mathematical analysis showed that planetary orbits were ellipses rather than circles, when the universe itself expanded from a bounded cosmos to infinite space, these discoveries strained the traditional framework connecting astronomical observation to theological understanding. The Vatican's response to these challenges reveals much about its approach to the relationship between science and faith. Rather than simply rejecting difficult discoveries, the Church typically followed a pattern of initial resistance, followed by gradual accommodation. New astronomical findings were first contained within specialist discourse, then reinterpreted within acceptable theological frameworks, and finally integrated into an expanded understanding that preserved core doctrinal commitments while acknowledging new cosmic realities. This pattern reflected the Vatican's dual mission regarding astronomical knowledge. On one hand, the Church needed accurate understanding of celestial mechanics for practical purposes, like calendar reform and timekeeping. On the other hand, it sought to maintain theological interpretations of the cosmos that supported religious doctrine. The astronomical tower served both purposes, gathering precise observational data while controlling its interpretation within theologically acceptable boundaries. The question of whether they were watching God or the universe, thus, misses the sophisticated integration these astronomers achieved. In the medieval and early modern Catholic worldview, the universe itself was understood as divine creation, its patterns revealing God's nature. Studying celestial mechanics meant studying divine design. The priest astronomers who worked within the tower didn't see themselves choosing between religious and scientific purposes. Their astronomical work constituted a form of religious practice, observing creation to honor its creator. This integration became more challenging as astronomy's findings increasingly contradicted specific theological interpretations of Scripture. The Galileo affair represented the most dramatic moment of tension, when observational evidence for heliocentrism directly challenged traditional readings of biblical passages that describe the sun moving across the sky. The Vatican's harsh response to Galileo revealed the institutional stress created when astronomical observation undermined scriptural authority as traditionally understood. Yet even during this period of conflict, Vatican astronomers continued their observations. The same institution that silenced Galileo maintained astronomical facilities where celestial phenomena were meticulously documented. This apparent contradiction reflects the Vatican's complex institutional nature. not a monolithic entity, but a multifaceted organization where different elements pursued different priorities. While theological authorities defended traditional cosmology, practical needs drove continued astronomical research regardless of its theoretical implications. Over time, the Vatican developed more sophisticated approaches to potential conflicts between astronomical discoveries and religious doctrine. Cardinal Barberini's suggestion that the Bible teaches how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go, represented an early version of what would become a more formal distinction between religious and scientific spheres of authority. This approach allowed astronomical observation to proceed according to its own methodological principles, while reserving questions of ultimate meaning and purpose for theological reflection. This evolving relationship between astronomy and theology reflected broader intellectual developments across European culture. The scientific revolution gradually established natural philosophy, what we now call science, as an autonomous domain with its own methods and standards of evidence. The Vatican's astronomical facilities participated in this transformation, shifting gradually from places where celestial observation served primarily religious purposes to institutions that contributed to international scientific discourse while maintaining religious affiliations. By the 19th century, when Pope Leo XIII formally re-established the Vatican Observatory, the relationship between astronomical research and religious understanding had been substantially reconceived. Leo's declaration that the Church and her pastors are not opposed to true and solid science reflected a new accommodation between scientific investigation and religious authority. The observatory's work would proceed according to standard scientific methods while maintaining a broader context of Catholic intellectual tradition. This modern approach rejected both simplistic opposition between science and religion and naive attempts to use scientific findings as direct evidence for religious doctrines. Instead, it positioned science and religion as different windows on reality. In the words of Vatican astronomer Guy Consolmagno, distinct but complementary approaches to understanding existence. Astronomical observation revealed how the universe functions. Theological reflection addressed why it exists and what meaning it holds for human life. Yet traces of the older, more integrated approach persist in contemporary Vatican astronomy. When Jesuit astronomers studied the formation of galaxies or the composition of meteorites, they understand this work not merely as gathering scientific data, but as appreciating the wonders of creation. Their religious vocation and scientific research are not separate compartments but interconnected aspects of a coherent worldview. They continue to watch both the universe and God, not as separate activities, but as dimensions of a unified quest for understanding. This perspective challenges popular narratives about the relationship between science and religion, rather than inevitable conflict or complete separation. The history of Vatican astronomy suggests the possibility of productive tension, a dynamic relationship where scientific discovery and religious understanding mutually influence each other without collapsing into simple identity or opposition. The astronomical tower housed this productive tension for centuries, containing both meticulous empirical observation and theological reflection on its meaning. The question of whether they were watching God or the universe also invites reflection. on different understandings of divine action in the world. Early Vatican astronomers often sought direct divine messages in celestial events. Comets interpreted as warnings, eclipses as reminders of Christ's crucifixion. This approach understood God as actively communicating through specific celestial phenomena, using the heavens as a divine signaling system directed toward human observers. As astronomical understanding developed, this direct interventionist model gave way to more subtle conceptions of divine action. God came to be understood as working through natural laws rather than interrupting them, establishing the mathematical patterns that govern celestial motion rather than manipulating individual celestial events. Vatican astronomers increasingly focused on these underlying patterns, seeing divine wisdom in the elegant mathematical relationships governing planetary orbits and stellar evolution. This shift mirrored broader theological developments within Catholicism and Western Christianity. More generally, the concept of divine providence evolved from direct intervention in specific events toward establishment of natural processes through which divine purposes unfold. Vatican astronomers participated in this theological evolution, their changing approach to celestial phenomena, reflecting and informing wider reconsiderations of how God acts in the natural world. For contemporary Vatican astronomers, this sophisticated understanding of divine action allows them to embrace modern cosmological models while maintaining religious faith. They need not choose between the Big Bang and divine creation, between evolutionary processes and divine purpose. Instead, they understand these scientific descriptions as revealing the mechanisms through which divine creativity operates. They watch the universe as a way of appreciating divine wisdom expressed through natural laws rather than supernatural interventions. This perspective transforms the relationship between astronomical observation and religious experience. Rather than seeking miraculous signs in the heavens, Vatican astronomers find religious meaning in the very orderliness of celestial mechanics, the remarkable fine-tuning of physical constants that permits cosmic evolution, and the emergence of complexity from simpler systems. Their religious response to the cosmos involves wonder at its comprehensibility, gratitude for its beauty, and humility before its vastness. Jesuit astronomer William Stoger expressed this approach when he wrote that God's creative action and sustaining presence are found not as arbitrary interventions, but in the very givenness, intelligibility, and lawfulness of the world which makes science itself possible. This perspective transforms the old question, were they watching God or the universe, by suggesting that attentive observation of the universe itself constitutes a form of watching God, not as a distinct entity within the cosmos, but as the fundamental reality that grounds its existence and intelligibility. This sophisticated integration of scientific observation and religious understanding remains available today, not just for Vatican astronomers, but for anyone seeking to reconcile modern cosmological knowledge with traditional religious perspectives. It offers an alternative to both scientific materialism that reduces reality to physical processes alone and religious fundamentalism that rejects scientific discoveries when they challenge literal readings of sacred texts. The Vatican's astronomical tower pioneered this integrative approach centuries ago, creating space for both precise observation and meaningful interpretation. Yet mysteries remain, both scientific and theological. Contemporary astronomy raises questions that extend beyond empirical investigation, that touch on ultimate concerns about existence itself. Why does the universe exist at all? Why does it follow mathematical laws comprehensible to human minds? Is there purpose in cosmic evolution? Do other intelligent beings exist among the billions of planets now known to orbit other stars? These questions blur the boundaries between scientific inquiry and philosophical or theological reflection. Vatican astronomers engage these boundary questions with particular interest, seeing them as natural meeting points between their scientific research and religious vocation. Their work continues the tradition established within the astronomical tower, using the best available observational techniques to understand cosmic mechanics while remaining open to broader questions of meaning and purpose. They watch the universe with scientific precision and religious reverence, not as contradictory approaches, but as complementary dimensions of human engagement with cosmic reality. The question that titled our exploration, "Were they watching God or the universe?" thus reveals itself as too simplistic. The Vatican's astronomical tower housed a more sophisticated project, watching the universe as a way of approaching God, studying celestial mechanics as a way of appreciating divine creativity, documenting cosmic patterns as a way of discerning divine wisdom. This integrated approach evolved over centuries, adapting to new astronomical discoveries and theological developments while maintaining continuity with tradition. Today, as we peer into the depths of space with instruments far more powerful than those available to early Vatican astronomers, we confront a cosmos far vaster and more complex than they imagined. Billions of galaxies stretch across unimaginable distances, many containing billions of stars with their own planetary systems. The universe expands at an accelerating rate, driven by dark energy whose nature remains mysterious. Quantum mechanics and general relativity provide powerful but incomplete and mutually incompatible descriptions of physical reality at different scales. In this expanded cosmic context, the questions that animated Vatican astronomy take on new dimensions. The relationship between divine action and natural law, between religious meaning and scientific description, between human significance and cosmic scale, all these must be reconsidered in light of our evolving understanding of the universe. The tradition established within the Vatican's astronomical tower offers resources for this reconsideration, demonstrating the possibility of maintaining religious commitment while embracing scientific advancement. As our documentary draws to a close, we return to the scene with which we began, the ancient walls of Vatican City, housing both magnificent religious structures and sophisticated astronomical facilities. This physical juxtaposition symbolizes the intellectual juxtaposition the Church has maintained for centuries between faith and reason, tradition and discovery, theological reflection and empirical observation. The astronomical tower embodies this juxtaposition in its very structure, a building designed for watching the heavens, built within the center of religious authority. The legacy of this tower invites us to move beyond simplistic oppositions between science and religion toward more nuanced understanding of their potential relationships. It reminds us that human engagement with the cosmos has always involved both empirical observation and meaning-making, both mathematical description and existential interpretation. The priest astronomers who worked within its walls pioneered approaches to this integration that remain relevant in our own time as we continue to discover a universe more vast and mysterious than our ancestors imagined. Were they watching God or the universe? Perhaps the most honest answer is that they were watching both, observing celestial mechanics with increasing precision while contemplating the divine reality they believed underlay cosmic existence. Their example invites us to maintain this dual vision, to approach the cosmos with both scientific rigor and existential openness. As we look upward today, using instruments of unprecedented power to peer into cosmic depths, we continue their tradition of watching, measuring, calculating, and documenting, but also wondering, questioning, and contemplating our place in this vast and mysterious universe.